Hi, this is the Gillmor Gang for Friday in 2013. My name is Steve Gillmor, and I'm joined today by some old people and some young people. And by old, I refer to Scoble, who's, of course... Yeah. Welcome, Robert.
What's up? I'm a little jet lagged, so...
Yeah, that's what I meant by old.
The show might be goofier than normal.
Well, get a beer and...
That's going to be hard to beat.
I got a Snapple.
Oh, excellent. What is that from?
Snapple.
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought you said a sample.
No, a Snapple. I got some, I got some kangaroo balls.
Well, that sucks to be you.
Somebody give me that as a Australian kind of joke gag, but...
All right, well, you can break them out later.
All right.
After you've drunk a little. Okay, the guy who thought that I was referring to him is Doc Searls. Welcome, Doc.
Welcome. Good to see you guys.
Likewise. And the British contingent on my extreme right, where he belongs, is Keith Teare. Welcome, Keith.
You know, if I'm on your extreme right, you're very left wing. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
Hi.
Bingo. And then from the other island, the state of mind known as Kevin Marks. Welcome, Kevin.
Hi there. Nice to see you all.
He wouldn't be British, this one.
All right, so instead of asking Scoble what's going on, since he's been in Australia and has no idea, Doc Searls, what's going on?
Oh my. Yeah, what is going on? I was afraid you'd ask that. I'm so busy looking at my own virtual navel, I'm not even sure if there's anything else going on at all. There's going to be this new Google Moto X phone that's going to follow you around. I'm sure
Robert has
can't
it.
wait to get it.
There it is.
You mean this? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure Robert's already...
Unfortunately, I lost the AT&T version in Australia, and this is my new Verizon version, which I just got. So,
which is the one you wanted anyway, right?
It's very convenient.
Oh, I'm sorry, I lost my homework.
I got another new toy too, a new Nokia phone. So
yeah,
good for you. Cool.
Yeah, great. Nokia, a
great
division of
camera.
Microsoft.
Knock yourself out, Robert. Knock yourself out.
It has a 41 megapixel camera on it, so I'm going river rafting tomorrow with a bunch of geeks. So we'll
make them all count.
So is that wind noise? Is that you, Kevin?
Oh, that might be me. Yep. Let me get a spuffle.
You have to break that wind. Move that mic.
So, what's your experience been, Robert, with the Moto X since Doc brought it up?
I love it. In fact, there's a video going around that came out last night about texting and driving and the devastation that it causes when somebody kills another person or aims them. And it's a must-watch. I just posted it to Facebook. And I wish every device didn't have to be touched to turn it on for simple tasks like navigate me to the Golden Gate Bridge or call Miriam Scoble. And the Moto X is the first device that listens to you full on and lets you talk to it without touching it and control it without touching it. So I think that's a good trend for the industry. I hope other manufacturers follow suit.
Okay. Doc, watch you're hitting the computer, which is, in fact, your microphone.
Do something, so bear with me while I do.
Okay. We'll talk amongst ourselves.
Yeah.
All right. So...
that happens when you get to a certain age.
Yeah, I get it. I think. I'm not sure. What did you just say?
I'm not repeating it. You just have to rewind on tomorrow's show, and you can tell what I said. Okay.
So I've seen some really good press about the Moto X. Actually, there seems to be a consensus that they've instead of biting off more than they can chew, they've bite bitten on what they can chew, and they've really advanced the idea. I think that they're ratifying many of the Apple decisions about the iPhone, screen size, etc. Just in time
it's
for
interesting because
Apple.
I have a Samsung, and I like the bigger screen sometimes. The resolution on the Samsung is higher than on the Moto X, and so using something like Waze, you see more a little bit bigger map or more resolution on the map. Or if you look at photos, I like seeing photos on the Samsung better. So some use cases still like the bigger screen, but the device itself the Moto X feels a lot nicer in your hand, and that is also true of the iPhone 5. My son has the iPhone 5, and we talk about this a lot. And the smaller phones are just nicer to hold in your hand. I like choice, you know. Some people like the bigger screen, some people like the better feel in the hand, and
Well, I
we
think
have lots of choices.
it sounds to me like it's the first credible competitor for the iPhone.
Is the battery life good, Robert?
Very good. It lasts 24 hours, like they said. It really does go over. Even with automatic on, so the screen is almost always on when it's on a table in front of you. Even with that feature on, it still lasts overnight, which is really pretty good. But the screen is also brighter than the Samsung, which is nice for other things. And the camera, I like the camera better. I put up a bunch of photos I did in Sydney of both, and it's really interesting that for my eyes, the photos are better on the Moto X. But a lot of people were arguing with me, and I think that's why Nokia sent me this phone to see if I can do a third test and include the Nokia in the test. But I think the quality of the cameras now is high enough to where most people can't tell the difference, and people pick up on color casts or things in the picture that don't matter to me but matter to them. It's really difficult for most people now to tell the difference between one camera and another, which is also a good trend.
Okay, we've got Doc back here. Let's see your picture.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I switched things. So, yeah.
So just keep in mind that if you touch the keyboard, the show goes
Yeah,
off
I know.
the air.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, great. So we're talking about Moto X since you brought it up, and Robert sounds like I think they paid real close attention to the actual usage patterns that people are valuing in terms of smartphones, right, Kevin?
Yeah, and I think that they part of the design center for this, my understanding is that they deliberately didn't do the highest possible res screen and so on, but they worked really hard on making the battery more useful and making the battery last a really long time. So that was a big part of the goal for this one. So that's why I was asking Robert about the battery, and it sounds like they managed to achieve that, which is good. Because one of the problems with, as you get the higher res screens, the brighter ones and the bigger ones, the battery life doesn't keep up as good.
Now, Clive Bolton in the chat room suggests that the iPhone looks dated. Just because Google's done a good job with Moto X doesn't mean that the iPhone suddenly is behind or anything remotely close to it. It's a lot like the reviews that I've seen for the Chromecast, which I think everybody but me has.
I don't have one yet.
Oh, really?
But I think
nobody does.
This is part of what you're talking about. This is iOS 7, and the hardware is kind of irrelevant. It's just does what it needs to do. It's good. It's got a Retina screen, but the software doesn't look dated at all. And some of the stuff in this is really pretty good. It's got Apple's version of Google Now. How can I do this? There you go. Apple's version of Google Now. So they've changed the notification center. It's got a today setting, so it kind of brings everything about today into the screen. It's got this interesting location tracking feature. You've got to go into settings to see it. Where is it? Here we go. Location. I can't find it now, but basically, if you set it up properly, it tracks everywhere you've been. I don't think it's at all out of date. And the Moto X is still running Jelly Bean, not even 4.3. So I think, whether it's modern or old-fashioned is more to do with the software than it is to do with anything else.
Doc, what do you think?
Actually, I think the iPhone has been dated for about 2 years. I think hardware-wise, the iPhone 5 is a stretched iPhone 4S, which is an iPhone 4 with sprinkles. I don't think Apple's done anything truly interesting since Steve died, and I think that's the big question about the company. I think that right now, however, the entire mobile marketplace is kind of sluggish, in part because we have two large OS competitors with only one hardware platform on one side and many on the other side, but there's still one dominating company with Google. And so we get more pixels on the Nokia, we get more incremental differences between other Androids, and we get lots of talk about who's winning, when in fact I think the whole thing is a bit stuck right now. I feel like the whole marketplace is iterating forward from 3 years ago more than it is doing anything really truly groundbreaking right now.
Well, it's also really hard to innovate on phones. I talked with one of the guys who runs a significant supply chain in China on the way to Australia, and coming up with a new processor, new screen, or a new feature set is pretty difficult. I've seen some of the fingerprint scanners that are coming out, and the new iPhone is rumored to have one of these fingerprint scanners, and you can start thinking about what that would let you do. Certainly for protection against having your phone ripped off would be really cool. But those are features that the people on that platform will go yay, but it won't make anybody go, oh my God, I have to have that new phone.
Well, it's not so much about the hardware improvements. It's that what Apple provides is a big ecosystem that they own and they control utterly, and you're inside that. And what Google's doing is, well, they're letting a lot of the OEMs have their ecosystems or operate inside the Android ecosystem, but with the Moto X, I don't know if you saw the Wall Street Journal piece today with, I think it was Walter Mossberg, it's the phone that follows you around. So you're inside their cloud, their bubble, and they're busy, doing anticipatory stuff. And so it's permitted surveillance, and it's a really interesting question where that goes. But the thing is, you sort of choose which castle you want to live inside, rather than, and once you've done that, and this is the case I want to suggest, I'm not necessarily saying I fully buy it or I'm making it, but it's worth thinking about. Once we've made this decision in the marketplace that there are two castles, and we have a choice of living in one castle or the other, and one castle has exactly one company's hardware, and the other one has many companies' hardware, but the king gets to make their own hardware, and it's just not interesting besides your choice of two castles. And I think that's where the logjam is in the marketplace right now.
Well, you hit on something, that these phones are now using NSA-style surveillance to serve you.
Yep.
I'm writing a book on this called The Age of Context. And you're absolutely right that the sensors in these phones now, I wish I had set this Moto X back up, but you can twist the phone like this and it instantly goes into camera mode, right? So that, in fact, it did it without even being set up. See that?
Yeah.
That's really cool, using sensors for new capabilities that, I forgot to put on my Google Glass because I was charging it up, but Google Glass is the first consumer electronics device that knows where I'm looking. Not just where I'm looking, where I'm aimed. So I'm aimed here, aimed south, and where I'm looking. It's watching my eyes as it moves around. Now, it doesn't yet do anything with that data. There's no app. There's no SDK. There's no... Right. So, Keith, when you're wearing that, Google knows where you're aimed and where you're looking, which can tell a lot of things, right? When you get pulled over at a traffic stop by a cop, the first thing they do is ask you to do this with your eye, follow your eye, have your eye follow his finger, right? And you know that if you're a cop that the eye moves differently when you're inebriated or not. So Google Glass could conceivably tell whether I'm sober or not on the show, and might even report it as part of the Gillmor Gang 2015 homepage, right? Who is sober on the show or not?
I think that sounds like a good plan.
Except in Robert's case, the answer is always the same.
No, not really.
Auto
Today
yes.
I'm sober but jet lagged.
Well,
I am not sober.
yeah, Tina says she's not sober.
But a segue from cameras.
Oh, wait,
might be,
before you segue to another good idea, I want to reinforce what you already said, which is that for a market that is becalmed or log jammed, as you suggest, Doc, the iterative advances in iOS 7, I think, are profound. I don't think that they're small. I think that they're enormous, particularly in push notifications, which I think is the new operating system.
Yeah.
And it's just putting another nail in Microsoft's coffin that they are just completely out of that conversation. 70% of the devices on the planet support push notifications. Microsoft supports it, but they don't use it, and they're not in that conversation. And I think it's super important that Apple innovate and that Google respond by innovating, because although they probably, according to Kevin, invented the push notification screen, I think they trail. We've had this argument going back and forth, but I think that it's not really about who's ahead, but rather whether both platforms are going to continue to expand in terms of their capabilities. And I've got a lot more. I'm much more excited about that, about the notification screen, and just its hopefully its expandability over the near future. I think that's going to be really important for a lot of things that we do.
Speaking of notifications, I loaded the Facebook Home finally on my Android device, and I find this very fascinating that they try to own the entire notification experience. But it does get me to use Facebook a lot more, because this thing's staring at me every day when I pick up my phone, and it gets me to click on a few more of those items, which increases the number of minutes per day or percentage of time per day that I spend on Facebook, which is, by the way, the only way Facebook is going to grow, at least in the Western world, because almost everybody is on Facebook in the Western world.
But I don't see that they can do that. I mean, that Facebook's problem is what Steve said. If you don't own the OS and you don't own the notification center, then you're just an app. And if you're just an app,
but Facebook Home sort of is a
it's a takeover. It's a takeover.
It's a takeover.
But it
that's
doesn't
really
work.
fascinating, because because it did that, I am getting used to it, and I actually like it better in many ways than the notification screen, which looks like this, right?
Yeah, but
Android
means,
notifications look really ugly comparatively.
But what that means, Robert, is that Facebook needs a phone, and it has to be competitive in phones, because very few people are going to do a takeover of their Android phone, and they can't do it on Apple. So yeah. Facebook is kind of, coming into the game with only half a hand.
I'm not sure I agree with you. I think that Facebook is making a mistake by excluding, or rather taking over, the notification stream, as opposed to multiplexing it with other existing streams.
Right.
And I think that's go ahead, Kevin.
I think that's it. I think the thing is that they take over the home screen and give you rich notifications, but they're only Facebook notifications, and the rest of the notifications get black holed and lost. And if they'd actually plugged in a bit better and said, "Oh, and we'll make the other notifications look good too," then that would be a more useful takeover.
I mean, I think that the mind reacts negatively to not knowing what it doesn't know, if that makes any sense, and even if it does make sense.
But they'd still have to persuade us all to install what is effectively a takeover. I agree they could do a better job, and really Facebook Home is just a shell that glues together Facebook Messenger with Facebook regular app with some bubbleheads. So it's a pretty thin piece of software right now. So they could definitely do a better job, but if they did do a better job, and they probably will do a better job, they still have to take over the OS because they don't own an OS.
Yeah, but taking it over doesn't mean that they have to shut out everybody else. I mean, the reason I think Google's position is so strong right now is because they have carefully, albeit with some pullbacks when things got nasty between the two companies, they've kept Apple technologies and their technologies. They've opened them up on the iPhone and on iOS significantly, which means that they have a much broader market than just their own cloud.
Yeah,
that's true, but Apple has been very clever at doing that with everyone. So the rumors are that LinkedIn is going to be integrated into OS 7. Facebook and Twitter already are at the level of the address book, alerts, notifications. Senior Weibo is integrated into iOS 7.
Yeah.
So Apple is the one doing the orchestration and integration of all these different inputs and outputs.
That kind of integration, I'm not sure how much it changes the game. I rarely use the built-in Facebook or Twitter stuff, and I watch like my dad and my wife and other people use their phones. They almost always go straight to the Facebook app. So I'm not sure that buys any of these companies all that much.
Somebody pick up that phone, would you?
One tip is to mute Skype when you're not talking. It would be so much easier if everybody did that on the Gillmor Gang.
Yeah, but it would change the audio quality. I'm going for Eddie Offord style here. Do you know what that reference is?
You'd hear the clicks in the Atmos, yeah.
No, Eddie Offord is the engineer-producer who created the idea of just basically mixing in the room without headphones. Notice I don't have headphones. Thank you. And we pay for this magical...
At least get a good ringtone. Come on.
I'll tell you it's actually really funny. What's happening is I've got Vonage auto forward and I've got 2 lines. So I thought it had stopped, so I unmuted, but then it rang the other line. Vonage doing
so we can all blame Jeff Pulver for this.
But the ringtones are everything, of course. That makes me feel like I'm in a British murder mystery, basically. They're calling to let you know that you're wanted at the station for questioning. Doc, what else?
What else? Oh my gosh.
NSA?
Well, let's see. Yeah, the NSA. Well, it's the thing that won't go away. That's what's interesting to me about it.
I'm highly shocked, by the way. The week it broke, I wrote that nobody's going to care in 3 or 4 weeks, and man, this story just has many more legs than I expected.
It's not going away, and I don't think it will go away. And an interesting thing is that have you seen there's a movie called Terms and Conditions May Apply? I highly recommend seeing it. It's by a guy named Cullen Hoback, and it's a documentary. It's making the rounds right now. It is in San Francisco, I believe, as we speak. And he added a little bit of Snowden to the end of it because he had a moment to do that. But basically, it's really not about terms and conditions. It's about surveillance and the general creepy feeling we have about it and who can we trust. And an interesting thing about that is that we have with Google and Twitter and Facebook these things that have, with their usage, arisen to the status of infrastructure and yet are not regulated. The Public Utilities Commission would not know what to do with them. Nobody at the Public Utilities Commission, like they could go down to the water treatment plant or they could go down to the road department and know what they're looking at and what they're regulating. But that's not possible. I mean, Google's a black box, Facebook's a black box, to a lesser extent, I suppose, Twitter's a black box. But what's happened is that let's say we were to want actual oversight, who would do it? Well, it would be the government, wouldn't it? Yep. But instead, the government is actually in cahoots with these people, right? I actually don't think that there is any real ill intent on the part of Google or Facebook or any of these companies, including the phone companies, which are much less moral in general, I think, than than the tech companies. But
well, including the government too, for that matter.
Well, my point is that they are much nicer than the government is, and they're complying. There's this. I think, but there are two issues involved. One is, how do we sort out the legal side of this thing, which is there's no real oversight of the government, which is obviously taking more liberties than these companies are, and the other is coming to some kind of socially based understanding of what's okay and what's not okay. Right now, absolute surveillance of us is taken to be okay in the U.S., but it's not so much the case in Europe. In Europe, there's still memory among living people of what was done to other people when a lot was known about them. And so having the right to disappear, having a default of anonymity rather than a default of full knowledge of who we are and what we're doing is much more ingrained in other cultures than it is in ours. And that's another interesting difference.
That's going to lead to interesting privacy fights, even inside Germany, because I was walking around with Google Glass in Berlin and talking to people, and they really loved the idea. The people love the idea. The government has this institutional memory, like you said, which forbids them from building databases about their citizens. So that's why they banned the Google self-driving car from driving down your street, because that can build a database about their citizens.
I agree with that. I don't like cars driving with no people in them.
No,
that's separate from the self-driving car. I'm talking about the mapping car, Steve.
Yeah, they talk about the mapping cars.
Terminator 6.
Separate. You can't mix discussions because that's a separate.
On the Gillmor Gang, you can't mix discussions.
Well, not. And
good luck with that.
It is the Gillmor Gang, Robert. It is.
Let's stay on privacy. So let's stay with a mapping car, which is separate from the self-driving car.
Street view. It was street view.
The mapping car that's driving around and sucking up your Wi-Fi hotspots and taking video of your street and all that. The Google Glass can do exactly the same thing, but the Google Glass has some utility for individual people, which is it can take pictures of your kids and make phone calls and stuff like that. So if you want to say, I'm going to ban Google Glass, which some people have advocated for, then you're banning all cell phones on the street, which ain't going to happen. But
it's just to go back to what Doc said about Europe, it is an interesting paradox, though, Doc. In England and in many European countries, there are cameras every 50 meters.
Yeah.
Including Germany, by the way.
The UK is exceptional in this respect.
Well, in Germany, if you drive the Autobahn, you see cameras taking pictures of your car every few hundred yards almost. Far more cameras on the freeway there than in America. We don't have speed cameras very many places in America. But in Germany, they're very commonplace, and everybody knows where they are. And in fact, Waze now maps them, so you know where they're coming up, so you slow down so you're under the speed. Australia had the same thing. We were driving along, and Rocky's driving a motorcycle right now through Australia, and the people we were with told him, hey, be careful because there's speed cameras here, and here, and you're going to get caught. And they are very, very strict on what they ticket for.
And it isn't just on the roads, Robert. It's in the streets. So, and the justification is the same justification here that the NSA uses, which is, look, if you want to be free from crime, and if you want us to catch the bad guys, that involves taking, permanent movies of the good guys too.
It's more than in streets. The BBC interviewed me for a radio show about Google Glass and privacy and all that. And we were sitting in a cafe, and right overhead there was a security camera watching us, and there was a sign saying this area being monitored for security.
So isn't it weird? Because in the UK they can't pass a law that gives people personal ID cards. That always gets rejected. But no one complains about there being a camera every few feet when you walk through the streets. So obviously there is the argument that the government knows best and that crime is the problem.
But it's not just the
government. We, the citizens, should just shut up.
It's not just the government. I mean, we saw in the Boston bombing that the speed with which pictures of the perpetrators were found and disseminated really changes this equation. It becomes much more proactive.
The interesting thing about that, though, is that it was the surveillance cameras that identified him. In other words,
Not
the pictures
just.
we've seen.
Actually, there was one picture.
There was also
of,
individuals taking photos.
Of one of the. There was one picture which was the most telling, which was used to triangulate that these were the guys. It was a long shot. It was taken by an individual, not a surveillance camera, and it showed them sort of in the middle, post-bombing, in the middle of everybody running around terrified. They were looking sort of passive and calm in that. It was all I'm trying to say is that, just to sort of pivot on top of what Keith said, is that, as a parent, I welcome more cameras rather than less. I really do. I recognize what you're saying, Doc. Historically, this has turned out to be a nightmare in the past. But the president was on a press conference today, and he made a similar point. He basically said that that if you look at this, and that what he's trying to do is to open the kimono enough so that people can realize, on the basis of I'm paraphrasing here, the credibility of some of our representatives, which of course is challenged since they're all in bed together. Pardon the expression. That that there's that what they're doing is necessary to try and protect us, and at the same time they're taking reasonable, what we will come to think of as reasonable concerns about how to do this in a way that is less dangerous to our civil liberties.
The fear, Steve, is not with our current government, which I hope has some checks and balances to it. It sort of does, even though it's wacky at many times. The fear is that our government will change in some future and become like Germany was in the 1930s.
Of course, and it doesn't have to be that draconian. It can just be, the difference between the two parties narrowing to the point where there's only one government. There's only one party, and many people think that's already true. Yeah, people think that that's already true. So, the extent to which we were talking about this just the other day, there was some data that was available, and the concern was who has access to it and who can do something with it immediately.
I have a couple other questions now that this is on the table. One, Doc, you pointed out, talked about how corporations are dealing with this. Google is actually very transparent on what they're collecting from you and what they're doing with it. If you search for Google and privacy, you see just how deep their privacy statements are, and you can even click and see what searches you've done and what they're tracking about you. And I assume that will get updated next year when the Google Glass comes out, to even what sensor data is being reported to Google. And I think they'll be pretty transparent about that and pretty open about that. We don't yet have that with the government. We don't know yet what they're really looking at and what they're tracking about us. And I would love to live more in a society, if we have to do it, to be where we understand what they're doing, or at some level. But the problem is, then you give your enemies the data about how to defeat the system, and it's a really tough problem. Let me
take this up.
Here's the thing. So there are a couple of points here. One is that we really, I trust Google. I think it takes a lot of trouble to be an evil genius, and I think that there's no upside to it for Google.
You trust them and not Apple?
I trust both of them to the degree that I don't think it helps them to violate those particular policies. But what's transparent are the policies. What's not transparent is the system behind them. We don't really know if they're actually doing what they say they're doing. There's no way we can tell. Who we would rely on, if we could, would be the government, but we can't, and because they're doing what they're doing. But my other point is that we're just at the beginning of trying to figure out what the rules here ought to be. We haven't lived in this world very long, the world where this kind of absolute surveillance is possible on the one hand, and where individual liberty is also liberated in other ways like never before. How do we reconcile all of, how do we derive all these, how do we take advantage of all these conveniences that are provided by the kings in their castles, while at the same time we have more power on our own as individual actors?
Right. So
how do we work that out? I think it's so early in whatever that's going to be.
Let me take this up just one more level and roll in the Jeff Bezos purchase of whatever he bought.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that there's a continuum through these two issues, which is the impact of technology and what it's capable of doing on not just our civil liberties, but also the ability for us to be able to have access to unscrubbed, unofficialized, un-1984 information.
No, but Steve,
I think that there's a concern which hasn't really been expressed, but I think it's interesting that it hasn't been expressed that much about Bezos, which is, what's going to happen when, Citizen Bezos takes over whatever the name of that Citizen Kane newspaper was. I mean, what's the deal here? Have we shut down, the Woodstein
No,
Express?
not at all.
Of course not. But
okay.
Here's
my take on that. Real quick, Keith, if you don't mind.
Okay.
I think that Jeff Bezos has absolutely almost very little interest, if any, in what happens on the editorial side of the publication. He'd like to preserve it, keep it going. I think he'd like to help them make money. And I think all of the papers right now are not doing a very good job of figuring that out. I don't think they know how to deal with customers. Actually, in part because their business model is split. They have their customers are both subscribers and the advertisers, and they are not doing a really great job with either one of them. Amazon also has all of us as customers, but they also have big B2B customers as well. I think they have a much better understanding of advanced systems for dealing with both of those, and I think that Jeff would like to bring that sensibility to bear on the way that the paper interacts with people. It's not doing a very good job. At this point, I think he'd like to help out with the business side of it. I'm not at all afraid of the other thing.
Doc, go ahead, Keith.
I just want to not lose some of the themes from what Doc and Steve were saying before. I remember going on protest marches in London in the 80s and having cops with cameras taking pictures of everyone on the march. And so technology, the camera, played a role in gathering intelligence about that section of the population that was, protesting against Britain's invasion of the Malvinas or the first Iraq War or whatever it was that I was on. And so it doesn't feel to me as if the fundamental relationship between the state and the individual has changed. It's just that the technology is now so much better that they can gather that intelligence on a much broader scale and invisibly. And that, they haven't been honest about that, so there's a fair amount of cynicism about what their motives are.
I don't agree that they haven't been honest about that. I think it is intuitively obvious to anybody who has ever used the internet that this stuff is going through machines that are not under your control, and that if you want to opt out of it, just turn off your computer and stop using your credit cards.
Right, but ignoring the bit about, just ignore the bit about whether they've been honest. The main point here is we, the citizens, are targets of surveillance in the same way that we're targets for advertising online. We are the targets. Doc's written a great piece of work all about, do we want to be a target, or should we be in control of what it is that we get put in front of us? And he can talk more about that. But I think there's a common solution here, which is also a technology solution, which is people having the ability to be anonymous.
Well, it gets deeper. Let's say we wanted to have a 1 million person march on Washington, D.C., and we didn't want the government to know that we were organizing it or holding it or putting it on. That would be nearly impossible in today's society.
It was nearly impossible, when John Lennon tried it, 50 years ago, or whatever the hell it was.
Right.
I mean, first of all, you're worried about the cops taking pictures. In the 60s, every second person was a cop in undercover.
True.
Yeah.
Not just the 60s.
Yeah.
No,
well,
my
that would
wife's
be
South
my point.
African, and she knew informers in South Africa. I mean, every second student was an informer.
All right, so Doc, if you're not worried about Woodward and Bernstein going to be being out of jobs, what are you concerned about as far as Bezos? I have some concerns about it.
I have I hate to say I have no concerns about that. I think I'm glad it's in individual hands. It's been taken off the public marketplace. I think being accountable to Wall Street is not as good as being accountable to an enlightened individual or an enlightened family, as it were. And I think Bezos would like to take it back there. I think something that Amazon gets very scant credit for is caring a great deal about customers. I've talked to people who work in customer support there, and they'll say that there is, when they have arguments there, they're almost always settled by what would the customer want? What can they do that's right by the customer? And although a lot of their processes are automated, you can get somebody on the phone there. You can't get somebody on the phone with Google, and you can't do it with Facebook or Twitter. You can with Amazon, and I give them credit for that. So I'm not concerned about that, but I do think that we don't have. Toward the points that Keith is bringing up, not so much about stuff that I wrote, but just sort of in general. I think that we're living in a profoundly new world here, where both individuals and organizations can take advantage of liberties they never had before with data and with equipment, where we have new norms that are totally provisional and 10 minutes old. And they will be supplanted by other new norms that are provisional and 20 or 5 minutes old. And so we're working all this shit out as on the fly. And we'll say now that some pile of scaffolding called Facebook is the new norm. It's not going to be in 5-10 years. There'll be something else there, or that company will be totally evolved.
But Doc, I agree with you, but I also think it's important, as we're working it out, that we push back where we feel discomfort, because otherwise it'll be worked out without our voice being part of the conversation.
Keep in mind though that I'm writing a book, and Shell just finished the privacy chapter, which is pretty interesting. But we're getting free ice cream in exchange, metaphorical free ice cream, in exchange for all this stuff. Google Now, for instance, when I walked into an airport with my Google Glass on it showed me my plane ticket and my gate number and whether it was on time or not. It knew that by looking inside my email and my calendar, and it serves me in other ways. It is helping me live my life because I give it access to so much data. And therefore, I'm going to give it more access to more data tomorrow, because I want even more features like this to help me live my life.
So I have a question, Robert.
Could you imagine, just a question, could you imagine sufficiently powerful, decentralized, intelligent agents doing that for you that weren't owned by Google? Because it's just software. Why does it have to be centralized?
I can, but okay, Google knows all my searches, so am I going to be able to decentralize every search I do? In other words, am I going to use Bing for one search, and then Yahoo for another, and then Google for another, and then Facebook for another, and have those all serve me in some way, the way that Google does? I don't know. I wish it was that way, but it's not.
No, but wait, somebody else knows all your searches, not just Google.
The NSA, yeah.
Hello, Obama. Somebody else. You know all your searches and all your different devices. All you would need is some software that puts your different device searches in one place, and you could know all your searches without anybody else knowing them.
Okay. Good luck with getting me to load a piece of software like that on top of everything I do.
Well, I think that's a pipe dream, but
and then, by the way, if I did, even if I know a company who is trying to develop something like this.
Shall I say? Imagine.
Well, exactly.
Yeah, but that was he didn't actually say that.
They're actually using Doc Searls' principles because they want to become the front end to my life, right, and let me own my data again.
That would not be my principles.
But now I have to trust a third company, but with all the data that Google already has.
You don't have to trust the company. So do do you trust? I mean, who drives your car? Who rides your bicycle? Who puts your pants on in the morning?
Soon I am going to trust Google to drive my car.
I haven't gotten anybody to put
by the
my
way,
pants on.
Toyota already has drives my car 30% of the time because I have a radar system in there that's driving my car and making decisions for me and saves my life if I do something stupid. So I'm already giving up my control, my behaviors to systems around me, and I'm okay with doing that.
Yeah, well, the Matrix agrees with you, and that's fine.
My self-driving car never gets drunk, never gets tired, never gets jet lagged, never gets distracted by something ringing on the dashboard, and can see 360 degrees and can make decisions faster than me. And by the way, Stanford has a car that is soon, within the next 2 years, will pass a NASCAR race driver for the fastest car driver around. So I'm okay with a car system taking control and taking me to work, so I can go watch TED videos.
Yeah, but the problem with that is,
so Robert, is there any example Keith and I could come up with that will at all convince you that being an independent human being is worth doing? Any example? Is there any metaphor whatsoever? Because there probably isn't, but I just want to ask.
Well, there are plenty of places.
That's why I asked about your pants. I figured, I mean, does Google hold your dick when you pee? I mean, it knows where the toilet is, right? So why should I don't even need to pull my pants down. Google knows where my belt is, and they can open it for me and aim this thing for. I don't even need to do anything.
I saw an electronic where you pee on the right spot and it turns color. It has a little LED.
I could use some help in
the
that.
Google toilet knows, right?
That's coming because they'll pay you to. Coming. Sure that you don't sprinkle all over.
Yeah, I'd like sprinkle insurance, please.
But there are things. I'm going river rafting with a bunch of geeks tomorrow. There are things that I want to do because they're fun to do.
And by the way, wouldn't it be awesome if they could suggest the right toilet paper to use afterwards, knowing your preferences?
Charmin, by the way, is the best. That's how I know your startup is taking care of people if they have great toilet paper.
Scoble, your mind is deteriorating.
Our people are the most important asset. If they have cheap-ass toilet paper, I know that they're lying through their teeth.
I think we should do a skit where there's a guy in everyone's house who walks around following you and suggests products to you every time you do something that are contextually relevant to whatever you're doing. And that would bring to life how ridiculous.
The Washington Post will be doing that starting tomorrow.
But anyway, there are going to be times when I want to drive a car, even after I get a self-driving car, because sometimes driving a car is fun. If you close Highway 92 for me and let me have a really nice Tesla or a Porsche or something, that will be a lot of fun.
So you're looking for a robot that will allow you some time to be able to experience the trip firsthand.
Yeah.
You're looking for.
I want a better overlord, a really personal overlord, not a big corporate overlord.
You're looking for a meditation-aware robot. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm glad everything's going to be okay.
Anyways, back to the point that Keith made. How are we going to get a decentralized system that can serve us? We're sort of getting that. I mean, Yelp knows some of my behavior. Hotel Tonight knows other. Google knows a whole lot. Facebook knows a bit. Amazon knows things I've bought. Rackspace knows where my cloud.
How do you integrate those? Can you integrate those now?
I think the way you are going to get integration is something that looks like IFTTT. IFTTT.
Okay.
That you can write little tiny scripts, and by the way, we can share the scripts with each other that can take some data.
Yeah.
If I put a photo up on Instagram, all of a sudden it can fire events that make a tweet happen or make a database entry happen or something else. That's how we're going to get these things to serve us in a new way. But that doesn't mean stop using Google, because I don't see a world where I'm going to stop using Google.
So what you need is to get to the point where everyone can have their own web crawler and their own internet in a box and can do their own searches. It's the decentralization of knowledge. And if do
you think that that's ever going to happen, though?
It's technically possible. It's technically
possible. It's technically possible I could have a supermodel for a wife, too.
You do. You do.
I do, but
Robert,
she's,
You better
she's
hope
not
your
on
supermodel
the
wife
Elle
is not
magazine
watching.
right now. Okay, so
rewind and erase. Rewind
So
and
Robert,
erase.
the argument,
No
Robert, your
editing,
arguments
sorry.
against this are the arguments
it's
against the
technically
PC.
possible I could have my own jet plane too.
Yeah,
Well,
let
in
Doc
the mainframe
answer.
age, that was called the PC. You know, we got the PC, we got the internet, we got mobility. Those are all things that were impossible when you looked at things only from a system point of view. So there's, you know, and always decentralization works in the long run, and almost always a and it's not the central. It's not the centralization. It isn't versus.
Give me 3 examples where decentralization has always won.
The PC, the internet, the car.
Okay. Well, but those are bigger things than.
No, they're not. No, they're not. The PC was a small thing. I'm using one right now.
Well, my Google Glasses is a supercomputer on my face that Thad started.
It's Google's supercomputer. You know,
Yeah,
there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that
more computing power on my face than existed in a Cray supercomputer in the 1982.
I've got a word for it. It's called untethering. So right now the cloud tethers us to centralized knowledge and information, and that's because there's no alternative. It's awesome. Let's face it. The ice cream.
And there is.
Awesome.
There are alternatives. We are going to have personal clouds. Look
We're
up
gonna have
personal
personal
clouds.
clouds. I agree with that.
Personalclouds.org. It's already happening.
Actually, my startup Just Me, that's what we call the person's space. We call it a personal cloud. There's some debate about whether we should call it a private cloud. What do you think?
Personal's
Either one. It's a PC either way. We keep doing it over again. So, works fine. Hey, Kevin's still here. Look.
I'm still here, yes. Just can't get a word in edgewise.
Kevin's trying to figure out how to come back with the peeing in the Google bucket or something like that.
No,
He's
It's
probably
By the
not doing
way, Kevin, you were
peer-to-peer
involved a lot with
networking, yeah.
microformats.
Well,
You and
what I'm-
Tantec.
Yes.
And microformat surely is an architecture designed to allow knowledge to be harvested.
Yes. So I mean, I was at the W3C social business workshop thingy for the last 2 days, and there's a big chunk of that stuff going on. And a lot of it was around the indie web ideas, which is effectively trying to recreate the sort of we all have our own sites view of the net from 10 years ago. So hosting your own content on your own site primarily, and then propagating it to other places so that people can see it too, and thinking that stuff through and plugging that together. And big chunks of that are built on microformats and on servers at the edge and things like that. But also leveraging the cloud systems as well. So one example is what's called IndieAuth, and the idea of that is you can log in using your own site, except that the way you do it is you don't have to host anything magic on your site. You just linked to the authorization providers that you use, like Twitter or Google or GitHub or whatever. And then when you log in with your own site, it can check that you are the same person you say you are there, and then it's verified you. And that's so you don't. It means that you don't have to host all this stuff yourself, but you can take advantage of those existing ones. But also it has the important characteristic that it means you're not just identified with one identifier, you're identified with possibly several, which means you have some independence from those identifiers breaking down or going away. So there's some subtle stuff going on around this space with both of the indie web stuff and personal cloud. And I think personal cloud is a good way to describe it. It's better than private cloud because the point is that it's your information that you're storing somewhere, and you're deciding how it gets marshaled and shared with other people.
I mean, this is a conversation that we had, Doc, on text when you were sitting in the front row at Esther's last conference. When you came up with the intention economy. And basically the conversation was, are we going to control our personal information, and are we going to surrender to what Robert calls the ice cream of the internet?
Well, I think the answer is both, and I think it happens in waves. I think right now we're sort of at high ebb on surrender because the ice cream is so good and it's so pervasive, and because some big companies are doing a really good job with it. I think that what Keith's working on, what Phil Windley is working on, what IFT is working on, which by the way is pretty much the same thing, it's just at 2 different levels. I think what's happening with clouds is exactly what happened with computers. They were mainframes. It was entirely a B2B business. Personal computers came along, and we got to do more with computers than the big guys could. And we could do more with networking because of the internet, and we could do more with communications because of mobility. We could do more with data as well. I think we're all going to be able to do much more with data than anybody else can, and I think it's going to be, it's because we are ourselves, and we can do more with it, and companies will show up to help us with that. It's not that we're going to do everything by ourselves. It means that we are going to be much more of a marketplace as individuals than as large groups that belong inside castles, which, because they get as big as they do, progress slows down. We saw that happen with the phone companies. We're seeing it happen now with social. We're seeing it happen with phones. We talked about that early on in the show. Is that there's a becalming in the marketplace that happens when a few companies run things. There are not so much flaws, but as shortcomings that both Google and Facebook have, which is none of us has a financial relationship with them. I can't get Google on the phone because they don't want to take money from me. That is a problem. They don't get intelligence that way. They're deriving secondhand intelligence. They're making machine guesses about me, but they don't really know me. And let me finish. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm saying it's inadequate. And we're going to have both. The answer to so many of these questions is like Yogi Berra said, when you get to the fork in the road, you take it. We go both ways. We make the most of both. It's not that centralization fails and distributed succeeds. It's that both succeed, but they succeed in ways that over time we discover which both do best. And I think we're going to find the things that Google Glass does well and the things it doesn't, because we don't have a better relationship with Google that we might have if we were actually paying him for the damn glasses or for what's going on behind those glasses. And if they were a substitutable service, they don't want to be a substitutable service, nor does Apple, nor does Microsoft, nor does the rest of these guys, and it's going to be a problem.
Well, I paid $1,500 for my Google Glass, so somebody's paying Google for something.
I'm glad you pay for things. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
guys. So this is the key.
I paid for my Samsung phone too. I didn't pay for the other two phones. They're demo units, but
this is the key right here. This is a 256 gigabit micro SDHC card, and with processing power. The edge is going to get more and more powerful because of this. Right behind my screen here, there's a 20 terabyte Drobo. Mm-hmm. In the future, there's going to be no problem having huge amounts of data at the edge. Yeah. And then it's just software.
What's a Drobo?
Right.
A Drobo is just a storage thing.
I have one behind my.
It's a RAID.
It's a
home rack.
Okay.
It's that box right here. Yeah.
And obviously we're early adopters, and there isn't much logic built on top of those things right now. I have a Plex server on the Drobo that pulls in media, but my web searches can't be done from there. But that's just a software problem.
I'm not an early adopter. I'm an early, middle of the road consumer. I wait for the critical mass. That's what's interesting to me. And what's interesting to me about this discussion, I agree with everything that Doc said. I agree with everything that you've all said. But I also don't see it as being a zero-sum game where that we are losing traction because we are, quote, becalmed. I think that we need time to absorb the rate of change. And I find what's going on right now to be enormously exciting. Precisely because we're not necessarily always dealing with the dream is over, that the excitement is down, that, Apple is led by, a suit, et cetera, et cetera. I see interesting things at all levels. And I think that something that Keith said, I think we're all saying this in a different way, the security that I feel in this environment is by continuing to sign on to multiple clouds, to multiple, data capture. The only way that, short of doing something which won't happen, in my opinion, which is to preserve my digital rights to the data that I'm putting out at the head of the chain. And we talked about this with the attention trust about 7,000 years ago. I don't think it'll happen. What I do think will happen is that as we have a failover between systems, that will, by definition, create interoperability between those systems to the extent that it becomes a value proposition to be able to take your data from one place to another. The easiest way of doing that is to put it in two places at once. So when you take it to another environment, you just basically kill the feed to the one that you don't want to use
But that's
anymore.
really hard to do. And, because we've been talking about this with Flickr and Facebook a long time. You can take all your photos off of Flickr and put them somewhere else, like Google Plus or 500px or wherever the hell you want to put them, SmugMug. The problem is that Flickr isn't just about the photos. It's about the commentary that we have on each other's photos. And so if you comment on my photo, who owns that comment? And even if you say you own that comment, how do you take it into another service and make anything useful out of that comment? It's only useful in the context of Flickr because we all had comments back and forth on that photo. The same thing on a Facebook post.
Go ahead.
And same thing, by the way, on a restaurant now. How do you take a restaurant off of Yelp and put it somewhere else? It's really, really difficult.
So that's the point of the stuff I was talking about this week. So the point of building this decentralized stuff is to have a way of hosting the stuff on your own site and propagating the comments to the other sites. There's a protocol called Web Mention that's been built up to do this that's starting to get implemented. And the point is I write the comment on my site, but ping your site so that it shows up there. So it's like the old ping back, but with a bit more security.
Here's the problem, because I've wanted that for a long time. In fact, on a Gillmor Gang, Arrington told me I was a jerk for wanting this, but he was right that I don't have the legal or authority to take your comment off of Facebook where you have one privacy model and put it on my own service that doesn't have to live under the same privacy model, right?
It's interesting.
Because on Facebook, by the way, on Facebook, if I delete my account, it deletes my comments on all your posts that I've made comments on. And I have the right to do that. I have the right to disappear and delete my comments. But I couldn't do that if you copied my comments onto your own service somewhere.
Right. And that is the challenge of... But the point is, if I've got access to read it, I've got access to copy it. You can't legislate for that.
We had exactly this
people
discussion.
TOS that, but
But it's really difficult.
Say you can't cache their data for more than a day, for example. But
it's really hard to rebuild that and have the same privacy contract, because if I delete my account on Facebook, my comments all disappear, and they probably wouldn't if you had copied them off somewhere else.
So I've had this exact debate with my engineers at Just Me, where we wanted to implement a feature called Take Back, and Take Back was the ability of a person who publishes something to take it back from whoever they explicitly sent it to. And we wanted to make it granular, so you could delete just your own version, or you could delete everybody's version, or you could be somewhere in the middle. And the problem is that unless you already know you want that feature at the very beginning of architecting almost any messaging system, it's incredibly hard to reverse engineer it in. And Facebook actually doesn't do it, Robert. We've tested it. You can delete your own stuff, but much of what you did still remains after you've deleted the original. I'm not sure about your case where you delete your whole account. Maybe then it does work, but...
Well, I do know when they deleted me that one day, all my comments turned gray everywhere, because I went around with another account and looked at where I'd left comments, and it was amazing how I got deleted. It was like my entire existence was gone.
But this is Facebook comments, right?
Facebook comments.
Yeah, so Facebook comments fanned out about a year and a half ago, and so it's being used as a service by a lot of other sites.
Right, but those I have Facebook comments on my blog, or I did until last week. Those comments are hosted on Facebook, and if you do something to those comments on Facebook, that it's replicated on all the edges. So
right,
yeah, I get it.
This is the issue. You can't always you can't delete the copies. So if
no, on Facebook you can.
Only if
Facebook, if I delete a comment and on TechCrunch, it's deleted
the copies.
on my Facebook
you
page.
can't,
but you can't delete the screenshot I took of it.
That's true.
right?
That's true, but that's a hacker way of getting around the Facebook.
Well, no, but
privacy.
this is what people do now. So there's been this
Well,
whole.
that's why I got kicked off of Facebook. Remember, I tried to get a script to take a screenshot of the phone number of your phone number,
I remember, yeah,
and turn that into a text phone number and put it in a database, which was back into Google contacts. And Facebook said, "You're not allowed to do that. That's a no. We own your contact data."
But aside from the practicalities of whether you can and can't do it, I think we all agree it would be desirable that a person can take back or delete something that they previously published from everybody who they sent it to.
It depends. So the problem is if they this was a classic problem where somebody would say something to bait people, then the people would respond saying, "Wow, you're an idiot," and then they delete the original comment. This is a well-known way of trolling on Facebook. You say something inflammatory,
Yes,
people respond to inflammatory things.
I remember the
in fact, my own boss did
inventor of that strategy.
My own boss,
remain
Rob
nameless.
Who funds the Gillmor Gang, or started funding the Gillmor Gang. He did exactly that. He deleted his friend feed account, which took all of his comments away all over the web, and that really pissed me off because we had deep back and forth on those comments, and it destroyed any of the arguments that he was a part of.
Right. So this is the challenge is what you delete. Also, so Twitter, when you cite a tweet, with their copy and paste technique, you basically say copy this tweet and you cite it somewhere. They're explicit that they keep a copy of you're pasting a copy of the actual text of the tweet, but then they will decorate it to show the context. If the tweet is taken away, then the decoration goes away, but your quote of it stays. So you can see which ones have been deleted when you cite them. So I've got a blog post that somebody said something idiotic. I quoted him, and then they got deleted. And you can see that the ones that have been deleted have gone. The ones that weren't deleted are still there. So yeah. There's a challenge of like making sure that when you're quoting someone that your record of that quoting is accurate. And it's difficult if they're attempting to delete things. Yeah. And particularly when this is evidence of abuse or threatening behavior and things like that gets hard. There are more subtle things. So another subtle thing Twitter does, Keith, is that if you've got direct messages, either of you can delete the direct message because that's only between the two of you. So if either you want to get rid of it, they decide the privacy model was, then it'll disappear for both of you if either of you deletes it. So there are some subtle things like that, and there are challenges when it's in a closed group situation.
So we took a different decision. We decided to have an owner. An owner is the original publisher, and to give that owner rights over everything that they publish all the way down the hierarchy. Obviously, it does not solve the screenshot problem. That's
right, but isn't that necessarily a problem? That's a if you're going to do something that's going to cause a Streisand effect, you only can expect to be screenshotted.
A Streisand effect? What does that mean?
You know about the Streisand effect? Oh, so
Barbra Streisand.
So Barbra Streisand, way back, tried to get an injunction to stop people taking photographs of her house, which meant that photographs of her house were published across the entire news ecosystem as people discuss this injunction. So it's a sort of term of art for the attempt to suppress something actually spreads it instead.
How did that go for her?
Not well.
Not well. But it's this is a classic pattern of you attempting to suppress something actually makes it more public.
Right. Okay. So in the spirit of that, Doc, any final thoughts before since you started this argument? Can you finish it?
Could I jump in before Doc's finals?
Yeah, go ahead, Robert.
Because I just was in one of the biggest Australian newspapers, and it's interesting because if you get outside the San Francisco bubble, it's like going back to the past. And in their lobby, they had no digital screens. They had only paper lying around. And I was like, this is why newspapers have been such a dismal business for the last 10 years, because they didn't get that they're not about paper, they're about information, and that they should be pushing and building a brand online because that's the future. I'm not reading paper anymore. I'm already living in the future, right? And I doubt many people who listen to Gillmor Gang read very many dead trees either. but it's amazing how bad the publishing industry has been at investing for their future. And I think Jeff Bezos is going to take the Washington Post into that freaky future and do a great job.
Yeah, you're talking about just the newspaper, not all of Australia, right? I hope.
No, just the newspaper. Yeah. I was just in the lobby of the biggest newspaper in Australia, and I just find it fascinating that they didn't have any iPads with their app lying around. They didn't have any TVs showing digital distribution. All they had was the latest today's paper lying on the tables, and it was like, this is a company that is not investing in their future.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure that's the case. It's interesting because I just spent some time in June in New Zealand and Australia, and I was extremely impressed, actually, that they're, in many ways, I think, more advanced than the U.S. on a lot of stuff. And the entrepreneurial energy, the forward thinking, and also a sense of that we're all kind of working on the same good things here was really strong. I had a great time there. So whatever that's worth saying.
Well, I think that I think that the Washington Post acquisition is very similar to what happened with Yahoo when they had an earnings call that exposed how vulnerable they were, and Steve Ballmer came in and basically crushed them, and they're still recovering from that. And I think that's what's happening. The reason that Bezos pulled the trigger now is not necessarily because he thinks that he's going to be able to do any better than what the Post and the Times and others have done to try and finesse this chasm that they have to go through in terms of revenue in order to be able to survive. But I think that it was just because they were vulnerable enough that he could get a good price, and I think that's a good thing, actually.
I don't know if you look at what's happened with the New Yorker between Andy Borowitz and Shouts and Murmurs. It's sort of like their own onion. It's really funny. Yes. And one of them was that Bezos bought the paper because he clicked on the wrong thing. There was another one somebody sent me. It's really brilliant. That said, customers like you also bought these other papers. Which
I saw that one.
That was pretty good.
Okay, so let's start with Keith, and let's just go around the table and bring this one home.
Tangential, but the other thing that happened this week, which relates to this, is that Instagram added new features to compete with Snapchat and Vine. They did Vine before. They've now done some Snapchat stuff. And there seems to be a kind of a competition growing up between Facebook, Instagram, Vine, and a couple of other apps for this kind of media that disappears after a certain amount of time, whether it's all short-form video is the other rising thing. And it's kind of interesting to me that substance is being reduced and kind of playfulness is being emphasized here. And Robert made the point last week that crazy shit, as he called it, is going to be what wins on mobile. It feels like that might be right in the short term, which is kind of disturbing as well as interesting at the same time.
Kevin?
I think that's interesting. I think, playfulness is definitely it's a sign that your thing is a success for people using it to play with each other on it. So that's the sign of things working. So when Twitter hashtags are used as elaborate jokes and things, that's a sign that it's moved into sort of consciousness, and people are starting to do things that you weren't expecting with it. My sort of sum up of the week was encouragement from the stuff as I was seeing for this indie web stuff, trying to get back to a web that was constructed out of small pieces loosely joined and not sort of always piping through the centralized things, but coexisting with them. That's the interesting part of it.
Doc.
I'm just glad that Robert hasn't outsourced his body functions to Google yet. That's
it's coming. It's coming.
That's not clear.
It starts with the glasses, right? Then the other things you can wear. What's that in your ear?
Hold on. You know, because we got the P Pro urinal target. You know,
Oh, that's excellent. I like
turns
it.
your toilet into a carnival game, and it keeps track of how good an aimer you are.
That's good.
I don't need an app for that. It's already a game.
I know. Yeah.
Maybe that's the name for the show this week.
There's an old female friend of mine said, "Men just want to squirt." So there's your aphorism for the day. I'm with Kevin and others. I think that we're at a point of, I think, high ebb and centralization, and we're going to start having a lot more distributed, liberated things happening on the edge and at the personal level. And the stuff that Keith's working on, the stuff that Kevin did 10 years ago, all this stuff's going to play out. And it's interesting to me that with the indie web people, the stuff that we've been dealing with at IAW, which I encourage people to go to in October. It's in Mountain View. It's going to be fun. Other things like that. I'm very encouraged.
Yeah, just a footnote to IIW. I was at a Gartner conference last week, and it is extraordinary to see how the spirit of IIW is now fanning out into the analyst community. I'm serious. There's a lot going on there, and it's directly traceable, as you often remind me, right back to this show.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So
and it's it also has to do with the fact that they bought the Burton Group. I think the Burton Group
yeah, exactly,
has affected them in a very positive way.
Yeah, and it's just a lot of the people like, well, I don't want to get into the details of it, but there's definitely some maturing of some of this stuff that we all sort of, nod at you patronizingly about, like VRM and stuff, that turns out to actually have some legs. So it's heartening to see that, and it's very exciting for, among others, Salesforce. So I'm glad about that too. Robert, your turn.
Where do I go? The freaky future. It's, on the decentralization, it's really interesting. Several of us were talking about our favorite news reading arrangement, and in the chat room at the last couple minutes. And there's a variety of answers from Feedly to Flipboard to FT.com and more, which shows that human beings don't like to be centralized, don't like the same experiences, and there is a thing behind decentralization. It's just I don't see how you're going to get a completely decentralized world in this world where Facebook and Google bring so much free ice cream to us.
Well, I think the as powerful as the desire for unique and personalized experiences is, there's also an equally, and in many cases more powerful instinct for finding and interacting with groups that share your view of the world. That's how all the great music artists emerged, was out of that phenomenon. And my hope is that we'll start to see that kind of energy again. I think that we're seeing that right now in terms of the whatever it used to be called television is now expanding in precisely that way. And we're seeing tremendous disruption, which we haven't even discussed it today, but I hope we can reconvene at some point in the near future and move into the whole
maybe we could set up
of Netflix and Spotify and what's going on there too.
Maybe we could set up next week's show, because I visited this company called Shoes of Prey that makes these custom shoes for women. And this is an example of where software has really changed the world, and new kinds of manufacturing techniques that they can make a custom pair of shoes that out of 1 trillion combinations and get that into people's homes around the world. That's quite interesting, and has deep implications for a number of businesses. Moto X, by the way, we don't even talk about that, but you can get a whole bunch of different combinations of color. You don't have to get just the black or the white.
It's called postmodernism. It's like, we used to change the world, now we change the color of our phones.
I'm not changing the color. I'm
Well,
just waiting for the next one.
Wait until Apple gives you a choice.
They've given me a choice. My daughter loves the white one. Both my daughters like the white one. I'm real happy with what I got. Oh, there's Kevin. Yes.
Okay, Henry Ford.
Change the color
Any
from white
color
to
you
black.
want, as long as it's both.
As long as it's black or white.
I just want it in black and white. The Washington Post lives, and that's a good thing.
Well,
But
so
I'm
your
still
day
partial
iPhone
to the
is
Times.
white and your night one is black, is it?
I don't know what the answer is to that. I want to thank Rackspace, and particularly Rob Legess, without which this show would not be where it is today. And we're going to go discuss that in just a few minutes down at TechCrunch, as a matter of fact. I want to thank NewTek and their TriCaster, and hoping that we have some good news on that front in the near future. I want to thank our producer and director, Tina Chase Gillmor. Thank you.
There
Yes,
she is.
the hand, the mysterious hand. And I want to thank, as always, Doc Searls for joining us infrequently, but hopefully
pleasure.
more often. Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
since you brought up TechCrunch, TechCrunch Disrupt is coming up in a month, I think, or something like that, in San Francisco, and I'll be there with a whole studio set up, and we're giving away a $10,000 prize for a wearable computing developer. So we'll have details about that next week.
Cool. Kevin Marks, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And as always, Keith Teare. Thanks, Keith.
You can call me Kevin if you
I
really
miss
want.
your logo. I miss your logo.
Well, I'm at
it's
home
so
today.
subtle.
I'm at home today, and I'm not allowed to have a logo at home. My wife doesn't let me.
Well, say thanks from me.
I will.
No. I want to thank everybody who showed up, and especially those who didn't. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.